Hey, this is Morning Thunder for Thursday, November 10th. This is TheBigJB. Hopefully, people watched the video from yesterday because it kind of gave a prelude to what I'm talking about today. Today, I am going to talk about Christianity and Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, first of all, is not an evil game. It was never intended to be an evil game. The guys who started it, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, were interested in coming up with some kind of tabletop strategy game. They initially came up with a game called Chainmail, of which I am the proud owner of the original manual. I'm very happy about that. Not that I've played it, I just own it. So, I believe, if my information is correct, either Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson, or perhaps both of them, were religious in some capacity. Although I'm not sure, so I can't be quoted on that. There is a tradition of high fantasy that is, like I said yesterday, I think that is reasonable for Christians to believe in, and I think that it's not a problem to engage in reading that or playing games that surround that or have magic in them. That isn't a bad thing. There's been this myth that Dungeons and Dragons is a bad thing. So third edition came out, and a buddy of mine who was a Christian had offered to DM the game, and I was convinced that D&D was like the devil's own product, like it was completely evil. In the 80s, there was a D&D cartoon my parents wouldn't even let me watch. Now, I didn't grow up in a overly religious home. We weren't like, I don't know, I wouldn't even call it necessarily as Christian as my home is in raising my kids. We went to an Episcopalian church. We went, fairly often. There are certainly periods of time when we didn't go that often, but my mom was convinced that it was a bad show and that there were bad things in it. Probably heard some rumors of stuff in the 80s where kids were going into sewers and playing D&D, and it wasn't apparently that rampant, but there were groups where that happened, and there were groups where some bad stuff happened. But those are the things that end up getting televised, and I think that the Christians who have an objection to D&D based on those rumors should remember that the stuff that they don't like about Christians that are televised, who represent Christians poorly, because not everything you hear on the news is the complete story. So D&D may be, at that time, those groups happened to be involved in D&D and happened to do some other stupid things. So the connection is not necessarily the D&D inspired them. I remember reading this this little pamphlet, and I'll bet other gamers who are watching this video, I'll bet you've seen this, where this young girl or Christian is invited to come play in D&D, and then they end up doing satanic rituals and stuff, which is completely beyond anything that I've experienced. And most D&D players haven't experienced that. Has it happened? I don't know. It's possible, but this is not a regular occurrence. My dad was really anti-D&D. He's also a believer, and the example that he had seen was horrible. Like, the guys that he had seen play, their characters were basically evil characters. They're mercenaries who are really into raping, and I mean literally, like in the game, raping, pillaging, murder, that kind of stuff. And I told my dad, you know what, that's their personality, that group of guys specifically, who he told me some other stuff about them. Yeah, it makes sense that they're doing that kind of thing. That isn't what the game is about. That isn't what, D&D is all about. D&D is exactly what you make it. It can be evil. It can be good. It is, in effect, I believe, neutral. Anything can become something that distracts you from the really important things in life. So from a Christian perspective, if you get lost in playing D&D, it becomes essentially what the Bible would refer to as an idol, as something that is placed above the time that you spend, reading the Bible and spend doing spiritual things. And I think that's true for anything. Anything can become an idol in that way. Could be World of Warcraft, could be skateboarding, for crying out loud. If you're so into it that your pursuit of spiritual things is sacrificed, then it's become an idol. It's got between you and this, higher thing that you're trying to do. I'm trying to use my words carefully here so it doesn't sound like I'm speaking specifically to Christians, but this is certainly an admonishment to Christians not to let those kind of things dominate your life. So D&D can become that, but it can also become something else. Every game that I've ever run, there's never been, I mean, the bad guys are supposed to be bad, but that's true of the stories that we love. We want our bad guys to be bad because the greater the evil that the heroes overcome, the greater the hero. So, and I've told my players in the game that I'm running currently, and yes, I am a DM, a dungeon master in D&D, and I've told my players that they're not going to encounter demons unless there is extremely evil stuff going on. And in that case, they will be equipped to overtake it, and it will have a holy component to it, and that's the way that I choose to run my game. There are other games that have run, and in fact, there was a good friend of mine who ran the Dungeon and the Dragon magazine for a period of time, who is a believer, and he was playing in a game where they were essentially going through the 9 levels of the infernal place, essentially hell in the D&D universe. And I said, you know what, it's not my style. I don't like that. I don't want to play that. That doesn't interest me. But I don't think that guy's a devil worshiper. The heroes were trying to overcome that, and I think it's very personal. I think that how you interact with D&D and your opinions on it is a very personal thing, and I don't think you can make a blanket statement to say that all D&D is bad and that no believer should ever play D&D. I don't think that you can do that. I think that for some people it's too much of a distraction. Some people get lost in it, and I don't think that they should play it. I think that for other people, they can handle it. It's an enjoyable hobby, and they can have, that can be something that they do. And I think that's true with just about everything. So that's what I think about it. I'm open to comments or discussion. If anybody has a question, anybody wants to challenge that, I'm totally down for it. This has been TheBigJB, Count Joshua on Twitter. Thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Have an awesome day today. Bye.